That was a wild one. That is switchgear. We put in 197 truckloads of switchgear into an Intel plant in Chandler. And what they were doing is, it was wild. I don't know anything about code. I can barely get my email to work, but I know what I would want it to work like. And I guess I'm lucky enough to be able to have a team that can read my mind and take the words that I'm saying and interpret them somehow into this vision of this website. So
From natural language into code, like modern LLMs.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But it actually had a hole in the crankcase right above the transmission. And the hole in the crankcase had a little coffee cup hanging from it. And that thing, when it revved up to a certain RPM, it would get the oil level up high enough to where it starts sputtering out of the side of the crankcase into this coffee cup. That was a wild one. That was
Yeah.
a really wild one.
Okay, let's hear it. All right, so we're here with Tom, the founder of Certify Me, and we're going to talk about some safety topics, some business topics, and then go through the vault of some pictures from 20 years ago or more of the heavy equipment moving business. There's really interesting stories behind every single one of these.
This is what qualifies me to teach your people how to drive forklifts.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so let's talk about the early days. So you launched Certify Me way before education tech or online courses were even a thing. This is the early 2000s, like 2001. What were some of the technical hurdles that you faced early on?
Well, for the first technical hurdle was building a website that worked with, all the buttons. And, you can go into the Wayback Machine, and it might be interesting to throw up some graphics of some of the earlier versions. But getting all the buttons to work and getting the payment to work. And at that time, once you registered your company, you had to, if you wanted to come back, you had to go back and find your company in this long, giant list. It just became gigantic. And that was kind of a pain for customers in the beginning because it was just PHP database. And I don't know if anybody knows anything about PHP database. I sure as hell don't. But I think it's pretty hard to figure out. And my database guy figured out how to collect the data, collect the companies, collect the students' data. The whole thing with the OSHA regulation for forklift certification, it's in the reg, it says very clearly interactive computer learning for the classroom training. That's what triggered me in 2000 to say, oh, well, I've been through interactive computer learning courses before, and I know how they kind of operate. I don't know how they operate, but I know what they're supposed to do. So we put the curriculum together and created modules, several modules and quizzes. And then on the final exam, it's important that everybody gets it. So, we don't want to be in a position where on the final exam, a student says, oh, well, I missed that one that I was supposed to put my safety belt on. Well, we want to make sure that they get every answer correct. So in the beginning, we had to make a system that would enable them to go back and correct their answers again and again until they got it right, with a little note saying, here's the correct answer. Here's why you have to wear your seatbelt. That was a pretty big technical challenge. And then the certificate generation was a big technical challenge, and getting those to look right. And this is all in 2000. And it was not, there was no ed tech. There were no LMSs. This is a thing that we just cobbled together literally in my garage, just trying to piece this thing together so that we could get it to work. And then when we got it to work, it created a whole nother set of nightmares. But once it was working and operating, we were able to fix it and patch it and get it to work. And then like 5 or 6 years later, it became this like spaghetti bowl of PHP. And I don't know what PHP means, but that's what my coders say. It's like this spaghetti bowl of code that he had inherited from the first guy that built it. So, there's a lot of challenges. And, at that time, paying for stuff online wasn't a big thing. People just weren't really comfortable putting credit cards in website. So that was kind of a big hurdle. And we were just early to the game, early. And, that's why we're still here. And it's been fun for me because I'm not a technical person. I don't know anything about code. I can barely get my email to work, but I know what I would want it to work like. And I guess I'm lucky enough to be able to have a team that can read my mind and take the words that I'm saying and interpret them somehow into this vision of this website. So
From natural language into code, like modern LLMs.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So speaking of early computer days, this is a old cathode ray tube CRT computer monitor from the 90s.
This is Command Central, man. This is where it all went down at DMX Group.
Yeah, so DMX this was the name of your business back in the day,
My rigging company.
which no one really knew what it stood for, but we internally called it Demo Man Extreme.
It was kind of a funny thing because I was going to go in the demolition business, and I did a handful of demolition jobs, and I wanted to be Demo Man Excavator, Demo Man Demolition, and so I thought DM Demolition would be a good one. Nobody knows what DM means, and I'd just be Demo Man. I don't know if you remember, I was like 28 or 29, and I bought that Ford F-250 camper special.
But yeah,
$800, and that was the nexus of the fleet.
the blue truck, didn't it have some funny name we called it? Dave, Super Dave.
Demo assault vehicle.
Demo Assault Vehicle, DAV.
Everything's got to have an acronym in my world, like the RBE, and yeah. So, they when I went to get insurance, commercial insurance for my enterprise, you're a demolition guy. You're blowing up buildings. I'm like, no, I'm renting backhoes and scraping over condos and putting them in dump trucks. And you're like, well, so I just decided, the excavating category on the SIC code had a different modifier or whatever, for the insurance, for liability insurance. And we're just using backhoes anyway. So we just called it DM excavated. So and then when we evolved from the demolition, because the crane guys started calling me up saying, hey, we got this rigging job. And I really segued from the demolition into the full-time rigging pretty quickly. So where I was still DM Excavating Incorporated, so we just changed it to DMX Group Inc. Yeah.
So cool. That's a great picture too up here. I mean, that's a very artistic, cool logo. You're good at branding, man.
That was a big press going through a hole in the roof. Yeah.
Yeah, I love the branding. I mean, even Certify Me is such a great brand.
Thank you.
Yeah. I've talked to you about this, but it's probably interesting for our audience as well. So there's this thing that I refer to as the Kinko's effect.
Oh, yeah. Tell it again, though. Tell it again.
Yeah. So this guy, Kinko's became like $1 billion business. And the founder wanted to differentiate his brand from all the other photo print shop incorporated companies all over the country, just little brick and mortar print shops. And they all had the same name, photo print shop, locally incorporated.
Right. Bob's Prints, yeah.
So he's like, I wanted something memorable that was short and unique. And so I went with my nickname in college, which was Kinko, because he had this big crazy hair.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I distinctly remember this office because when I was a little kid, Mom would take us here in the summertime and we would play in the back room.
That was that big storage building. We had 40,000 square feet of storage for Honeywell. And we had this contract to handle all the internal equipment moving around all around the country. They had the internet was new to these guys too. This is like 98, 97 maybe. And they were trying to set up an intranet where they could exchange assets. Like the plant in Cincinnati has a press that they don't need anymore, and it's been depreciated out and has zero book value. So if they can send it to the plant in Phoenix, who needs that press, they can actually handle the transaction internally instead of scrapping the press, getting rid of the press, selling the press. And then these guys go and buy a new press. They can sell them the new press, gives it appreciation in the new branch, and they get all the benefits of the machinery moving around internally to different divisions instead of going out and saying, oh, well, we're going to sell this one to the broker, and then we're going to go out and buy a new one from another broker. It was like, well, this guy in Phoenix needs this machine. So we're doing that all around the country for a long time. It was really a heck of a deal.
And it's just storage. And all you had to do is move the stuff around, which you already,
Yeah.
that's what you were pro at.
Yeah. And we were buying the storage for 25 cents a foot and selling it for $1.25. Love the storage business.
Yeah. I remember the entrance to this building had a landline, and the ringer on that phone must have been 120 decibels.
It was so loud. Because they had to hear it,
You had to hear it over all the air compressors and air conditioning
Yeah.
and all that stuff.
That was before we had Candace answering the phones. And
So what you see here is the outside metal, the tin, corrugated steel on the outside of this big storage building. And then this is the inside office.
it didn't have this office. This buddy, this carpenter, Johnny, we built this office in a weekend.
Oh, he framed it and walled
We
it.
framed it. We tacked it to the floor, framed it, walled it, did the electrical, did everything just to make offices so that we had a place that was air conditioned. Because remember, that was like a big steel tin box. In the Phoenix, Arizona, it was unbelievable how hot it was in there. But it had a million swamp coolers, so it wasn't too bad. But that wasn't going to work for the office. So yeah, we put this thing after I rented that space. The next weekend, Johnny and I went in there and we built this thing, drywalled it, painted it, did the whole thing in 48 hours.
Wow.
3 offices there, if you remember. There's this
Yeah.
my main office, and then Candace had an office. And then there was that office that I had for the trucking company, because I built 2 extra offices that I could rent out.
And that's where my sister and I used to play.
And the trucking guy moved out when we were in between tenants.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good memories.
Oh,
What's this one?
that's on the roof of a 35-story building in downtown Phoenix.
On the roof?
On the roof. And see how those chillers, see how the tubes are next to each other?
Yeah.
On the one that we took out, the tubes were stacked on top of each other. So we had to build a gantry inside this building with only pieces that we could handle by hand because we couldn't get a forklift in there. So we had to modularize, build this gantry out of aluminum beams and crib blocks to get the old one out, and then this is a new one going in. And then we built, with Ward and his aluminum planks and those big rollers. You'd see those big, tank style rollers. And putting this chiller in took about 45 minutes. Taking the one out took literally a day and a half, because we had to build all this special gantry stuff just to roll it out. Then the crane was, it was a 250-ton conventional, and it was, all the way down on the ground. So we're doing everything by radio, and yeah, and that was a wild one.
So these little guys here are the rollers.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you lifted it by crane to the roof of the building and then rolled it inside on those aluminum planks.
After we took the old one out.
Those aluminum planks look very handy and hard to come by.
They were unbelievable, and Ward had a whole bunch of them. And what they were World War II landing strip planks. So these things would all clip together, and some of them were like this thick, and some of them were this thick. And Ward would buy them at auctions because they're so great to roll stuff around on because they're so dang strong. And they would clip these things together in like jungle airstrips and potholes in airstrips so that they could repair them really quickly. And Ward had a whole bunch of these things, and they were unbelievably handy.
That is so cool.
We could make a platform out of anything. We rolled that 475,000-pound transformer with those rollers on those plates and 575 crib blocks.
That's what I was going to transition into. This right here is a big pallet full of crib blocks. And so I will link to the video where you had to shuck 700 of these things to move that 475,000-pound transformer.
That was unbelievable. I mean, that was man. Watch that big hard. That whole story was just miserable.
Yeah.
He'd end someday and elaborate on what really went down and all the shit we really broke.
All right, what do we got here?
There's a big old press. You gotta stand it up. It's on its back right now. Big old clearing press.
So
Actually,
this,
there's a set too of standing them up too. So we pick them up off the trailer in their bag, and then we set locks on the ground, and then we start laying it over, stand it up, and then once we got it stood up, then we just rolled it inside the building.
so this is the bottom that would interface with the floor, and then these look like big cams.
They're big wheels, just big centrifugal wheels to make that press go up and down. Yeah,
Is it like a forging press?
stamping press.
Stamping press.
These guys made straps for like the straps you see on construction. You know, it's strapping together when they're framing. That's all they did was make fasteners and straps and stuff for construction.
Cool. Here's the knuckle boom.
A knuckle boom and an air handler. That was out at it was an aerospace company out on the west side. That was the name. Did a bunch of stuff for those guys, and they really liked this machine because we could just drive right in, set stuff off, and we're just done and gone, and not a bunch of stinky propane powered forklifts and guys running around. We were really efficient with that machine.
What is an air handler?
Just something that moves air. Like your air conditioner has an area, a box in it it's where the air comes in and goes out, and it just I'm not an HVAC guy. They said, "Hey, come move our air handler."
Pretty great. What?
That's the on the roof of that building. That's the motor. If you go back to that other shot, you can see the one going in. See the motor on the side by the guy?
Yeah.
You're right behind the guy. That's how they're configured now. Back in the day, go back to this other one, the tubes, like I said, if you remember, the tubes were stacked on top of each other, and this friggin' thing was bolted to the side. And it's only 7 feet tall, 4 feet thick, and 3 feet wide at the base, and it weighs 30,000 pounds.
Wow. So it's a big cast iron turbine that you attach an electric motor to?
It's just a water pump. You put a big electric motor on it. Yeah,
What's a water pump?
it's a water pump for children.
Wow.
So we had
That's
to take that
amazing.
part out. Then we had to build a gantry, and we picked up the top tube. We got the bottom tube out, and then we lowered the top tube, and they got the bottom tube out. The top tube out, and then we just put it right back in with the new configuration of the children.
And then is this a winch line to get it down the ramp?
Yeah, we're just pulling it because we had to go up a little hill to get over there.
Right. So cool.
Yeah, we had these little pullers. We had just a standard fuel tank delivery.
On the knuckle boom. Wow. So that knuckle boom really extends far.
It was a handy piece of machinery. I can't thank Dan Martin enough for loaning me the money to buy that thing from him.
Yeah. And what was the lifting capacity on that?
34,000.
And it reached out like 40 feet.
Yeah, it was a heck of a machine.
So cool.
Just kind of set me apart from the crowd.
Yeah. There's a big heister.
Now that's a forklift.
Yeah. I remember there's only a couple of these in all of Phoenix because we would drive around the industrial district south of Tempe and downtown, and these things are so big you have to store them outside. So I knew where every single one was in all of Phoenix, and they were my favorite. They were just like giant Tonka trucks as far as I was concerned when I was a little kid.
Yeah, and you can see you got to have a 10-axle trailer to pull it around. It's a heavy load. It's just an unbelievable piece of machine, and it'll pick up and drive around with 100,000 pounds. It's a 50-ton capacity machine.
How much? So it would lift 50 tons, 100,000 pounds. How much do you think it weighed by itself?
I think the whole total weight was like 160, 170.
170. Wow. And then big old dually off-highway tires, big giant agricultural wheels.
Like it's like we're already cyborgs. We have a little guy inside this giant machine operating this, contraption.
Yeah. And it's got 2 smokestacks. Does it have 2 motors?
Yeah, it just had a big diesel in it.
Big diesel. Would they use like big Detroit diesel 2-strokes or regular turbo diesels?
We had a couple with the Detroits. Love the Detroits. Those things are just so hard to kill. They're 2-stroke. They're smoky, they're loud, but we had one that I had bought off at an auction. I didn't realize it at the time, so it was kind of dirty, and I didn't really, crawl under and really inspect it the way I probably should have. But it actually had a hole in the crankcase right above the transmission. And the hole in the crankcase had a little coffee cup hanging from it. And that thing, when it revved up to a certain RPM, it would get the oil level up high enough to where it started sputtering out of the side of the crankcase into this coffee cup. And as long as we kept it full of oil, it ran like a champ.
And so was the coffee cup there as a measurement tool? Like when the coffee,
Yeah, when it filled up, you change the coffee cup just so it wouldn't drip all over the floor.
and pour a little more oil in the hole?
Not a coffee cup. It was a small, like Folgers coffee can.
Okay.
Yeah, well, not a coffee cup, a coffee can. With
Yeah.
little wires in it, so hold it up, and it would just go. It just kind
Yeah. That's so funny.
we ended up running that thing for 4 or 5 years like that. Never missed a beat.
Man, that is a serious trailer.
That's a lot of trailer just to haul that thing.
And so these big heisters, did you have one of your own or would you rent these?
I had one of my own, and we used to rent them also.
That's so cool. I mean, yeah, just look at the tilt pistons on the mast up at the top.
It's just enormous. There's my 36 heister and my 15 heister, and then we added more counterweight to the back, as you can see.
Yeah. And so what's the idea here? You lift this up with two forklifts.
Big vertical mill. Just pick up, both sides at the same time. Pull the trailer out, set it on the ground, set it on dollies or rollers or whatever, and get it in the house.
Groovy.
There it is. CertifyMe.Net and Rigger Supply.
Oh, there's that little hovercraft thing.
Their trade show. Yeah, I was Rigger Supply. We were distributors for all the jacks and the rollers and like those tank rollers you showed, you were outlining in that picture. And also these guys, these air handlers, and they're really cool for like clean rooms and big injection molders. Like some of those big injection molders weigh 500,000 pounds if you want to move them all in one piece. And these air dollies are so cool. If the floor is good, you'd have to like seam over, like if there's like any seams in the concrete or anything, but you'd have to go over with like masonite and just make a nice flat, airtight surface. And man, those things, I mean, we had them underneath literally a 500,000 pound injection molder. A guy in each corner, we could literally just turn the thing like this.
Wow.
Rotate it on its axis. And it's just on a percussion of air like that thing,
Yeah, so you can kind of see here, the cushion of air is 0.003 to 0.005 inches thick. And so you can imagine the air pressure on that little tiny gap.
Yeah.
Would be big enough to lift 100,000 pounds per corner.
I guess it's just physics and math, right?
Yeah, the Bernoulli effect, when it goes through a narrower channel, it speeds up. There's that vertical mill.
Machinery we moved all day long. That's just a typical big vertical boring mill. Well, there's a big press. That was a wild one.
Yeah.
Really wild one.
Okay, let's hear it.
That thing came in on its back on a trailer. And I don't know if you can see that, but that guy is standing up there with his fall protection. And you can see it's like, 9 feet wide. Oh, it's probably 12 or 14 feet tall, at least. How tall is that guy? So it's like 18 feet tall, and it weighed 104,000 pounds. And it came in on its back on a trailer, and it was going into the loading dock of this plant. Everybody else wanted to cut a big hole in the roof, do this big elaborate thing. It's going to cost a shit ton of money to cut the hole, repatch the hole, make it so they can lower this thing in through a hole in the roof. And we decided that it would be a good idea to just jack it up on the trailer, build our aluminum plank platforms underneath it, roll it into the plant on its back, and then stand it up once we got inside.
How do you do?
So, and this is when we were loading it from the first plane, and I'm remembering now. This is when we were loading it because it wasn't a big deal to get it out of the plant, but to go to the new plant, that's what we had to do. And then it was going into a 4-foot deep pit because you can see how big it is. Where it bolts to the floor is like this high because this whole section about where the guy's standing is below ground. So we just filled this hole up with the crib blocks, those 6x8 crib blocks, strategically to where we could get them out of there as we were standing it up. So we stood this thing up with a 36,000-pound forklift, with a 15,000-pound forklift chained to it, holding another 5,000-pound forklift stacked on top of the counterweight.
My
All
God.
chained together with the mast blocked off. So the mast just became a giant hydraulic ram. So there was the tires weren't a factor at all. We juiced the pump because you can adjust the pumps on those heisters. And we got that thing because once we got it up, it gets easier and easier, It gets less and less weight as it goes up, right?
Mm,
So the hardest part is right here.
yeah.
And it just gets easier and easier and easier as it goes up. So the most we're ever going to have is half the weight. So we had a roughly 50,000, and we had enough forklift. If we combined 3 of them, shit.
Can you describe the forklift stack again visually?
We had a 36,000-pound forklift on the machine, the machine chained to it. We had the special little gantry, not a gantry crane. It was a little arm that would stick out. They'd clamp on the forks. It was really stout. We could pick up anything with it. And then we had the 15,000-pound forklift chained as tight. We picked it up and chained it to the back of the forklift so that it was kind of dangling from the back of the 36. And then we stacked another 5,000-pound forklift on top of the 15,000-pound forklift and chained it all down for counterweight. It's just like in the stupid videos you see. People doing the dumbest shit ever. We did all that.
So we're stacking forklifts on the back of forklifts as counterweights. I guess that's slightly better than lifting forklifts with bigger forklifts to get more height.
Done that too. Not proud, but I've done it.
Oh, that's awesome. That's a great story. So what's going on over here in the background? Is this part of the press as well?
That's just another press.
I see.
Yeah. I think we moved like 6 or 8 of them in there for him.
Man, that's amazing.
But it was literally like a door. It was like 50 inches thick, 18 feet tall, 9 feet wide, and weighed 104,000 pounds. And it was like a door. We had to stand it up inside on its head.
Wow. That's amazing.
That was nuts.
Yeah, I mean, look how tall that thing is. It's like the height. It's like 5 people high.
It was a beast. There's how we're standing it up. That's that green press. So here we are. We got it. We set it down. We grab one end, and we just start picking it up. Like I said, just picking it up and then catch it with the crib blocks. The weird thing is you think you have after doing this for a certain amount of time, you have a sense of center of gravity of a machine. You can say, oh, well, this motor's here, this, like that chiller, the pump's on the side, the chillers are stacked. You can kind of, after a while, kind of guesstimate where the center of gravity is. But I swear to you, every time we tilted up or stood up a press or stood up a tank or did anything, I don't know if it's a psychological thing or your brain just can't wrap your head around it, but it always seemed like it had to go so much farther than it should to catch off. And I was thinking, oh, this is going to slip. It would just go. But it's amazing. I think your brain can wrap around how far it has to go to actually, be in a dangerous situation. So, yes, we just catch it with the blocks.
Is that an excavator? No,
Yeah,
that's a crane.
big machine tool. It's a big horizontal mill. It's a Nagata machine tool, a vertical mill, or horizontal mill that we got out of Nevada. We got like 6 of them. This was the first building that we had the storage deal with GE Capital and Honeywell with.
So they would deliver the equipment and then you just put it in storage and move it inside the building, and that was that?
Yeah, and then we'd charge them to store it, and when it was time to go, we'd load it up and deliver it wherever it was going to go. And I went a totally different tack. My competitors all had a little office and maybe a tiny little bit of storage in a big yard. so they could drive trucks around and, turn cranes around and do all that stuff. And I kind of went the opposite tack and said, I'm going to develop a storage business. And so I went for maximum storage. And this was horrible because it was just a tiny little yard, but we made it work. And the storage was so valuable and it was such a good business. And then later, my competitors all abandoned their giant yards and moved into giant warehouses.
So your advantage was you had indoor storage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I really, pressed that as a unique identifier for the competition. Like, hey man, we're not going to sell your stuff outside. We're going to store it inside.
And would you charge by the footprint?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'd measure the outside diameter, like this thing kind of hangs over. You can see we charge the outside diameter plus 1 foot all the way around. So if the footprint was 10 by 10, it became 11 by 11, which I think is fair. Because you can't just like cram them in like next to each other. You got to make room to maneuver forklifts. We had to make rows, and we're constantly rearranging. And
yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Was there ever a case where someone did a call and said they needed a piece of equipment that was in like the back corner of the building that you needed to move everything in order to get it out?
Not just sometimes, every time. That's like it happening.
But then on the inside, would you just use those hovercraft things or rollers, or just shuffle stuff around?
But usually we could just get them at forklifts, make room to just be able to drive and set them down.
Leave a little pathway.
If they were too big or in a weird spot or something, we'd use the rollers, but, we're very adept with them, so it wasn't a big deal. But, those things weighed 140 pounds a piece. It was not fun working with them. So the old knuckle boom, that was a wild one. That is switchgear. We put in 197 truckloads of switchgear into an Intel plant in Chandler. And what they were doing it was wild. It was all these, the drywall guys, the electrical guys, the HVAC guys, the electrical guys, the plumbers, the pipe fitters, the roofers, everybody's working on top of each other. And we had 197 truckloads of switchgear that had to go in this place. And the bank of the switchgear was like one was like a 12 by 12 transformer, and then like 6 panels just like this on each end. So it was a big bank array that had to be built. And they were up on these pads, and they had this platform outside the window because they were all going in the second floor. And the platform was built by the HVAC guys to handle their duct work and, a little bit of stuff. And so it was there, it was in the way, but we couldn't touch it because they said it wasn't rated for what we were doing. So we rigged up this contraption where we had a beam underneath the big transformers and underneath the pieces. And then the rigging would go up, the rigging would, and let's see if we can do this, demonstrate. The rigging would go down to the piece, normally. And then instead of this being, a chain just going up or a strap just going up, this is a chain fall. So we could adjust this one. So we would come in, we would land it on the edge of the platform, and then tilt it up. Tilt it up at the chain falls, and then roll it in, and then take the chain falls off the front. So we had to stuff it in the window with the rigging as it was going in because we couldn't touch this platform. There was 197 truckloads of that stuff. They had to go in, and we worked literally around the clock to do this because it was coming in. We had to receive it in the warehouse, put it on trucks, get it out to the job. We were only allowed to work from like 2 to 8 every night because everybody else was on top of this thing. And they built this thing in like 7 months. They spent like $2.5 billion building it, and they were only going to run it for 36 months or so to build chips for anti-lock brakes. And they geared up all this money, all this expense, this whole thing, just to make chips for anti-lock brakes.
Wow.
And I know the plant's still there. I don't know what they're building in there now, but that's why they built this fab. And it all had to happen like right now. It was unbelievable. It was summer, so there's lightning going, and there's some monsoons coming in, and we got crane booms, and this thing sticking in the air, and yeah, it was wild.
Holy moly. How long did that job last for you guys to get the 197?
2 months. About 2 months.
It took 2 months to get all 197 truckloads in. That's intense. That's very intense. That's cool, man.
But there again, the main reason I got the job is because I had the indoor storage.
Right. So you could stage the equipment at your facility and then bring them in one by one.
Inventory it, bring it in, stage it. The electrical contractor guys would come out and figure out where it goes on the different arrays and the banks, because there's like 18 banks of these things. It was just unbelievable. It was just this giant room filled with electrical gear.
And were you rated to operate cranes?
Yeah, when I was doing it, there wasn't any rating or anything. Because I was really young when I was running some of my dad's cranes, and before he got out of the business completely. But that kind of came on later, and then I refused to get my CDL again. When it was up for renewal, I just said, nope, this is a terrible idea. I'm running a business. I'm building a business. I don't have time to drive a truck, no matter how convenient or easy it might be at the time. So I got out of, operating cranes and driving trucks and doing all that. And I think it was smart to do it that way. Just
focus on operations and operating.
Yeah. And it's easy to, I'm going to, we're in the afternoon, get into this truck and driving this thing because we need the extra help instead of scrambling to find somebody. And, there's other things that I should have been doing than driving a truck. I did that for a long time.
And you said this crane is rated for 65 tons?
I think it's that 65-ton link belt. I think.
And
I'm not sure, but it looks familiar.
And so what would happen here? This mast would come down, grab onto this extender piece and swing up.
It's a fold-away jib. Yeah. You can you can run the sections all the way down, and then that jib, it's on pins, and it swings out. And then you can clip it in with more pins, just literally like pins that big around. You pound them in, you put a cotter key in, and then you have you can extend the boom by 30 feet. And some of them have a stinger. You can pull out this square tube, like this big, and extend it out another 30 feet. If you just pick up something really light, but you need a lot of reach,
And so the lift capacity would decrease every time you add an extension like that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about, the from the center of the slew ring, the center of the hoisting moment, away from the crane, from that center. At a 10-foot radius from that point is where it's rated at 65 tons. At 12 feet, it might be 60 tons. At 18 feet, it might be 40 tons. At 65 feet, it's going to be, 3,000 pounds.
And so did you just have to know all that, or would you have a lookup table inside?
No, there's a chart. There's charts all over the place. And you really have to know how to read that chart. You have to know how to, interpret the chart and know what's happening with your radius at all times, or you'll tear up a bunch of machinery really quick.
Or tip over.
And tip over, it happens all the time. It happens regularly. There's a little semi-clean room action. You see how I stole the Gordon and Smith logo?
Yeah.
My shirt.
Surfer Man. I wonder if I don't know if there's any pictures of the Scary Pirates shirt.
I've got one. I've got a shirt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Scary Pirates. What did it say on the back? Go away.
Go away. Those are our message to customers. Go away.
Leave us alone.
Because I would tell the manager would come out, we're moving presses or doing something. He's like, what the heck? I was like, dude, just go in your office, have a cup of coffee, and when you come out, it's going to be clean, straight, leveled, ready to go. You won't even have to think about it. But really, you need to go away. Because they've hired us to do what they can't imagine how to do themselves. They would much prefer to do it themselves if they could.
Look at those big outriggers on the knuckle boom.
Yeah.
Man, that thing is just like a transformer. It just folds up into a little string.
I could get inside a 12-foot door. It's cool. That's another little press.
Yep.
There's a big press going in on its back.
More crib blocks.
And there's that pump coming off the roof of that building.
Yep.
And see how that crane has the jib? We're using the jib. But the crane's big that'll pick up 30,000 pounds with a jib.
Man, that is a giant water pump. That's amazing.
Water pump. And it's all cast iron, and the pump itself is bronze.
Right.
Brass or whatever.
Man, it's just a small aside. I watched a video the other day about how the Hoover Dam was built
Mhm.
back in the day in the 30s. It was, I mean, that's got to be the most amazing like construction marvel from that point of the century ever. Didn't Slim work on the Hoover Dam?
He worked on the horseshoe dam.
Horseshoe Dam.
It was part of the Swirl Lake chain. It was about the same period. They were doing a lot of infrastructure work, and he was in a dump truck for about
That's
5 minutes.
right. And then gravity killed
He
him.
and Cecil Peltz, a guy who became very, very wealthy and well known in the crane and rigging business, and my grandfather, a guy had these 2 old chain drive dump trucks, and they were doing building the horseshoe dam, and it was a big, it was an earth dam, so there's a lot of moving rocks and dirt around. Anybody who had a truck could go work on the job. So they had these 2 dead trucks, or they had 3 dead trucks, and they made one good one out of the 3 dead ones, and then they agreed to pay the guy. And once they got the job going, and they'd be able to pay him out of the proceeds. And they were friends, and the guy really liked Slim and Cecil. It was a federal job, so it was all union, and they hired this guy out of the Teamsters who had never really driven a truck, but he had been a taxi cab driver from New York City. And his first run in the dump truck, he went down the hill, went too fast, lost it in the ditch, killed the dump truck, killed him, and killed my grandfather's dump truck business. All in one morning.
Dang.
He was like 19 at the time.
Dang.
He was
Yeah,
like,
man. Yeah, those dams are just unbelievable. It's just an unbelievable amount of material to move. Is that a gantry?
That's a gantry at a water treatment plant. They needed this new gantry because theirs had gotten all corroded from all the smell and gassy stuff. And they wanted to rebuild this thing. We had a nice contract to take the old one out and get rid of it and build a new one and install it with a 3-ton hoist on it. And it just so happens I found this exact gantry that was the exact replica of the one that came off the job in my friend Spencer Shumway's yard. He actually had 2 of them. And I said, "Hey, Spencer, man, will you sell me that gantry?" "Yeah." It's, $1,500. Hey, that's it. And I think we had in the bid like 36,000 for this gantry. And I had to pay a guy another $800 to put the special paint on it because it had that special anti-corrosive paint. But got lucky on that one. That was just pure luck. Just found the exact same thing. Didn't have to buy it. Didn't have to build it. Didn't have to do anything. It was just ready to go.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the bid was 36,000 to build a gantry,
To build it, paint it, and put a hoist on it.
but you found one already built. Nice.
Yeah, like maybe $3,000 in the whole job.
That's amazing.
That was my first trial with Marco on a rigging job. That is a big bridge crane, a giant crane for inside a building. That goes up and down the ceiling. One of those things, giant bridge crane. And it did that. It busted my finger. I split my finger wide open and just popped it like a grate.
That was the thing that fell on your finger?
Yeah. Well, there was a whole
Jesus.
bunch of legs that were all just piled. They were all just, H-beams, I-beams with mounting brackets on them. They were like 20 feet long and, heavy stuff. I mean, they all weighed like, a couple thousand pounds apiece. And they're all nested and screwed up, and I had a bar, and I was trying to pry them apart. I got pissed off, and I had a crane on one end and trying to untangle these things because they were like, pixie sticks where you just throw them in the air and they just land wherever. That's how these assholes unloaded this thing at the rail yard. And then I was picking it up, and another one next to it shifted and just squished my finger like a grape. And then I had to finish the job because the train was leaving that night.
Oh, brutal.
Yeah. My buddy Harry Rieger came over and bailed me out and got it finished for me. There's that old Taylor with the 2-stroke Detroit in it.
Cool.
Yeah.
What a beast.
Kind of our standard deal. Driving the forklift. What is that, 96? Well,
96, August 12th.
30 years ago. Holy shit. That was the day before my birthday.
Day before your birthday. It was probably,
I was 34.
It was probably 134 degrees in Phoenix.
Dude, it was miserable. You can see that's an outside plan.
Yeah. So hold on a second. This is part of the building that you drove the truck around it, and you're nested inside of the building around that pipe.
Wow. We're using the forklift to help the knuckle boom is helping the forklift. Just the initial part of, just like you said, just getting it up past.
It's lifting it
In
up.
other words, we're standing it up right there.
So that's the versatility of the knuckle boom, is you can drive it in the building around all the stuff, then unfold it and do what you got to do. And so you would drive in with the equipment on the back of the knuckle boom and then lift it to the ground.
If there was room, sometimes we had to just do it outside the door, but it was really handy for that. They really, we were able to kind of dazzle the folks.
Yeah, that's amazing. That is amazing. And so what were the controls like for the knuckle boom? Were they on the outside and you could adjust?
Yeah, you can see right where that driver's side door is open.
Mm-hmm.
Right below that, you can see the levers and stuff, and they're on both sides. You can operate it from both sides. You
Yeah,
can run all the outriggers, and you can run the machine from either side.
cool. So you could theoretically like keep this part of the arm fixed and then lift this part of the arm using this piston.
Oh yeah. It's completely, yeah. They're all completely autonomous.
Wow.
So extension. That was wild.
Yeah. What's this one?
Story. This is a whole story.